Hello and welcome to our fifth episode of 3 Question Thursdays. I'm delighted to say that we have Catherine Gallagher, the Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner and General Manager South Asia at the Australian Trade and Investment Commission with us today. Catherine's executive and non-executive career spans public, private and not-for-profit sectors. Until taking on her role at Austrade, Catherine sat on the boards of Place Design Group and Monkey Bar Theatre for Young People, and as well as sitting on several advisory committees and operating her own consultancy practice. Prior to this, she was the CEO of Sydney Harbour Foreshore Authority, a public trading enterprise during a period of unprecedented foreshore revitalisation. Earlier in her career, she held positions including that of Counsellor Public Diplomacy at the Australian Embassy in Tokyo, Head of Public Relations for Australia Television International, Head of International Policy and Promotion for the Australia Council of Arts, and Deputy Director of the Asia Link Centre, Melbourne University. So welcome, Catherine, and it's absolutely wonderful to have you here with us today. In February this year, Senator the Honourable Simon Birmingham, Australian Minister for Trade, Tourism and Investment, led a 120-strong delegation of business to India, and they were from different industry streams. So firstly, congratulations to you and your team at Austrade on the success of the Australia-India Business Exchange. So Catherine, what are some of the outcomes and long-term benefits that you see from that?
Thanks, Petula. Well, definitely one of the long-term outcomes of the Australia-India Business Exchange has been to inject an absolute optimism and newfound understanding and awareness of the opportunities in India for Australian business, and also just a much greater mutual respect and understanding of what's going on right now. In terms of overall outcomes, and I'd like to start from the higher end outcomes and then drill down a little bit to the specifics. The AIB-X, or Australia-India Business Exchange, was a recommendation emanating out of the India economic strategy. And the objective at a high level was to address the lack of India contemporary business literacy in Australian business community and also across academia and government. And within that recommendation, it also recommended that this delegation be led at the highest levels of government. And it wanted to see a much deeper people-to-people exchange as a result of the program. The fact that the Honourable Simon Birmingham, as you mentioned, our Trade, Tourism and Investment Minister, led this delegation, sent a very strong message to India about our commitment. And Minister Birmingham was also supported by a number of his counterparts from the state government and in fact 2 former state premiers. As you might be aware, or for those who aren't, there were 4 specific sectors for which we sent delegations, and these were across education, resources, infrastructure and premium Australian food and wine and beverages. Those sectors are actually those that were also highlighted in the India economic strategy. And at a tangible level for those participants, we already know there were 7 significant agreements signed, or deals, so to speak, across 4 academic institutions. In the resources sector, an MOU was signed between the Australasian Minerals and Metallurgy Institute with the India Institute of Technology, which was a significant milestone for that group, and a number of agreements have occurred between the companies. Similarly, with our infrastructure sector, a number of extremely strong leads emanated out of that for, to my knowledge, most, if not all of those companies, but of course that's commercial in confidence. And I must say, to an extent, the premium Australian sector probably had the highest profile in terms of its outreach to the broader public. We were able to launch a specific Australia store on Amazon. Swiss also launched its own online store within Amazon, and we had a fabulous partnership with Food Hall to bring a Taste of Australia showcase into its supermarkets. So at the highest levels down to the more granular specific business outcomes, there was something in there for everyone. But I'd go back to my first point, which is to say that it certainly did achieve the IES's objective of injecting a wonderful renewed energy, literacy and relationship between Australia and India at the highest levels across business, government and academia. And I really do congratulate all those people for participating, particularly when we were at such a strong and difficult time with COVID beginning to emerge. I'd also say we had over 250 customers participate in those programs as well. So to our India counterparts, I'd also like to congratulate them and say a very, very big thank you.
Thank you, Catherine, for sharing that with us. Impressive and significant outcomes to further strengthen the existing business relationship between our two countries. So delivering transformational change through teams is something that you've excelled in previous career positions as well. It'd be great to know that now as Senior Trade and Investment Commissioner and General Manager, what are your top 3 strategic priorities for Austrade South Asia?
Thanks, Petula. You've asked what are my top 3 strategic priorities for Austrade South Asia. Well, I must frame my priorities with the overarching statement that fundamentally my priority should be and is to ensure that we keep expanding opportunities for Australian exporters, educational institutions and investors. So that goes without saying. Within that, the 3 areas that I'm focused on are implementation of the India Economic Strategy, implementation and representation of Austrade's new organisational structure and focus on digital first, and thirdly, my personal passion is around implementation of diversity in everything we do. So going back to implementation of the India Economic Strategy, I am very much aware that we will soon and hopefully soon be in a post-COVID environment. That said, the fundamentals of the IES and its 10 priority sectors are very much still the same, with education as the flagship, resources, infrastructure and Premium Australia all categories and areas that warrant absolute concerted effort post-COVID and in line with those delegations that came over and put the effort into engaging with India. Those opportunities are very much there. So we will continue to work in that space. Next, implementation of the new Austrade. Austrade is at the forefront of embracing technology, a digital environment, and new technologies. So we have a strategy of digital first. Our whole operating model is going to be very much providing content, providing opportunities in a digital environment. So into the future, and hopefully not too distant future, much of what exporters are looking for will be able to be achieved through our online mechanisms. But we will continue to work very, very closely too with those exporters who can generate high economic output and opportunities for the broader Australian community. And these don't have to be big exporters, but they need to be those who can demonstrate a commitment to a long-term engagement in the markets in which they're entering or are already at. So that's my second priority. And my third priority, which talks somewhat to your point about my experience in transformational change, is about ensuring that we have diversity across everything we do. And the reason I talk about diversity is because I'm very much committed to excellence And the only way, in my mind, that you can reach excellence is to ensure that you have diversity of thinking, diversity of view, diversity of output, diversity of input. So at a management level, I very much would like to see a diverse workforce. We are getting there. Austrade is committed to that. South Asia, I would suggest, is a little bit behind, certainly in terms of representation of women in senior leadership roles. But I shouldn't just say women. When we talk about diversity, at a human level, we're talking about diversity of gender, we're talking about diversity of ethnicity, we're talking about diversity of ability and disability, and diversity in sexuality. And so there is a broad range there. And as an organisation, culturally, we want to see all of our society represented in our workplace and in our partnerships. So, yeah, for me, implementation of IES, implementation and championing the new Austrade and how we represent that to you. And thirdly, diversity in everything we do. So I hope that answered your question.
It certainly does, and that, everyone, is vision with a clear purpose. Thank you, Catherine, for also mentioning diversity and inclusion. I think it's absolutely crucial to India's growth story as well, and not just a regulatory push, but for organizations to drive that cultural change in actual practice. So moving on to the last question. As we've seen, the economic impact of COVID-19 has been disruptive globally, but even the darkest clouds have a silver lining. In your view, what are some of the new opportunities for Australian exporters to India? And in the context of inward investments, in which industry sectors do you foresee investments in the future?
While planes are grounded, student mobility is by far the most impacted sector in terms of the Australia-India relationship. But I've been incredibly heartened by the way in which the educational sector, schools, tertiary institutions, colleges, have all really stepped up and adjusted their curriculum, tried to accommodate students, and really evolved their operating model. So whilst this is the most disrupted sector, I feel it is going to be the one that will bounce back as quickly, or most quickly. And also I think that reflects a level of maturity in the relationship between the Australian educational institutions and their counterparts and students in India. We have a very strong relationship and trusting relationship there. And also the fact that Australia has handled the COVID situation so well on the international stage, I'm sure that is actually going to bode very, very well for the sector, both in terms of its rebound with confidence for Indian students and their parents, but more widely in the global community. Australia has demonstrated its sophistication and its ability to respond responsibly. When it comes to the new opportunities, certainly the health sector is going to be one in which India and Australia together has strength, particularly in the research space. Of course, PPE is one component, and that's where everybody is looking for the opportunities to fill a gap. But for us, that research collaboration is something that I think will really stand out as an area both for investment and collaboration. The other two segments where we're seeing opportunities arise, very much the infrastructure space. The Indian government is planning to spend $2.5 trillion on infrastructure. Australia is very well placed in its credentials across design, planning, construction, all areas of infrastructure. So again, a very good and hopefully many opportunities for us there. And finally, last week, I think it was, yes, the Indian government has announced private sector participation in coal bed methane production. So, of course, resources is a strength of ours, and that will always be a space where we see opportunity. So, just very broadly, that's what we're seeing. But I'd like to come back to you with that on that one in a couple of months, Petula, because I do think yet again there'll be more opportunities, more clarity as we see more detail on the stimulus package, and also how the relationship and conversations between our two prime ministers develop over the next little while. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Catherine, and we'd definitely like to revisit this area with you in a couple of months as the business and economic environment continue to evolve. And with that, thank you so much for sparing the time, Catherine, to be with us here today. It was motivating, it was inspiring, it was insightful, and I'm sure our members and those watching it found it very useful. It's always a pleasure interacting with you and collaborating with Austrade towards a shared purpose of increasing bilateral trade and investment between the two countries. Thank you to those watching. On 11th of June, we have a webinar on trade and investment opportunities for Indian companies looking at the Australian market. We'll have Catherine as well as the Trade Commissioners of Australian state governments in India speaking with us and sharing their insights. We'll soon advertise how you can register for that. Also, thank you so much for watching 3 Question Thursdays. I hope you're enjoying it. We'll take a break next week and we'll be back the following. So until then, have a great day, have a great week, and I'll see you on the 4th of June. Bye. Bye, everyone.